Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, an amazing show. Gary Kline has been around the world twice recently, and he's bringing home some ideas about broadcasting and broadcasting's future and how we need to worry about a few more things where our content is going. He's got great advice, and Chris Tobin is here too from a magical transmitter site. It's all coming up on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, saving, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By the new Ruby console from Lavo. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. And by the Telos Alliance, shaping the future of audio, inspiring you to create the most exciting and engaging audio experiences imaginable. Visit telosalliance.com/opt-in. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the weekly show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower and so much in between now. It's more than ever. And our guest is the guy who's going to tell you what is hot and latest and the things he's seen from his most recent 2 trips around the world. From the first class section of a Delta airliner. This is This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. I'm not in my usual office. We've got some digs at a little vacation spot in Hawaii. So we're doing the show from Hawaii. Next week, I might be at our radio station here on the island of Kauai in the village of Lihue. So we'll see about coming to you from there next Thursday. Hey, but my usual co-host is here. He's here, and he's in an amazing spot. I don't know how he gets internet into all these places, but it's Chris Tobin live from some transmitter site somewhere. Hey, Chris, welcome in.
Hello, Kirk. Yes, I'm a transmitter site here in the city, New York City, and it's got a couple of television and radio stations here. What you see behind me is a VHF DTV combiner system for 2 VHFs that are going online here. And unfortunately, putting a camera inside the combiner cavities will give you nothing more than an empty-looking box. Since we can't see RF, there's not much to see inside the cavities.
Wouldn't that be a great troubleshooting help if we could see RF? Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, you would be able to
sprinkle dust.
Sprinkle
or if we see dust.
That'd be great. Or if we had special glasses, and you could just see RF at different frequencies, different colors. That'd be awesome.
You can check if your STL is working.
That's right. So you're in some unnamed building in New York City, and you said, are you putting in some new gear there to combine these stations?
Not the TV stuff. No, I'm working actually on a radio station, a link. Actually, behind me. A friend of mine called in a panic, so I'm taking care of that. And I'll be working on a TV project later in the month, also at this building. But today, not today.
Well, so during the show today, Chris, you and I really hadn't had a chance to talk before the show. Are you going to have an opportunity to give us a little bit of a tour there, or do you want a few minutes to chat about where you're at during the show?
Yeah, we can do that. But not much of a tour. Well, I can just show you some stuff. Like, it's not much. Unfortunately, the corner of the floor that I'm on, behind me is broadcast, but to the other side of me are those 3-letter agencies, and they don't like when I'm up here doing this stuff. The guys were here earlier, and it was interesting conversation. It was fun. Thankfully, I know them.
Yeah, we won't make any of them mad. We won't do that because we want you to be able to go back up there again. But Chris, when you're on location, I never know if you're there just because you can or if you have something to show us.
Both. I have my IDs. I just decide where I'm going to be and go in.
Well, that's not unlike our guest, Gary Kline, because Gary knows radio people all across the country, and he was traveling across country, probably doing his usual one phone in each hand, a phone on each ear, steering with his elbows, going 90 miles an hour, and he stops at a radio station to be on our show. Gary, welcome in.
Here are the phones.
I knew it.
In each hand. Everybody makes fun of me for my flip. Whoops, it's upside down, so that's not impressive. My flip phone, but the reason I carry a flip phone is because it's carrier diverse, it's got a long battery life, and you can easily flip it open and make a phone call while you're driving down the road. So people always make fun of me for that, but I like it.
It's probably easier to shoulder a flip phone like that, right?
Yeah, you can do that if you're working on something, sure, but it's just easier to dial with, and so yeah, I am traveling the country with 2 phones, sometimes in each hand.
Well, and you've stopped at a Yeah,
What's
you
that?
stopped at a radio station to be with us instead of having to, be on the show while you're driving. I appreciate that.
I did. I'm actually should be on the road right now, but it just turned out I was running behind, and I'm like, well, why get on the road for half an hour only to stop? I'll just stay here where I've got internet and foam and acoustics around me. So
Can
I
you
am.
give a shout out? Can you give a shout out to where you're at, or is it secret?
No, this isn't that secret. I'm up in Wisconsin today in the beautiful Midwest. Some people call this the Nantucket of the Midwest up here in northern Wisconsin. It's nice. I haven't been here. Last time I was here, there was snow on the ground, and I actually got stuck. So I'm just thankful and happy to be in weather where the temps are over 70 degrees.
Well, I'm glad you're able to stop and make it and be on the show. Folks, Gary's going to talk about, because he does a lot of world traveling, as you know, and he gets the opportunity to do a lot more of what I've been able to do a little bit of, and that is to see other broadcasters and see what's hot. And Gary just has a way of kind of shoehorning himself into relationships with manufacturers to find out what's coming down the pike and what's cool, what's hot. And he talks with a lot of program directors too, and station owners, people who are setting the direction for radio broadcasting and trying out, hey, is this going to work? They throw a lot of stuff up against the wall and to see what sticks. And so from an engineering perspective, that's what Gary brings us. And that's why I always like talking to Gary to see what he's found out. And that's what we're going to do on this show of This Week in Radio Tech. Gary's got some cool ideas to talk about, some technologies. And not just that it's cool, but as broadcast engineers, when we're in those meetings with programmers and owners, people, again, who are consultants, people who are setting the future for radio, if we as engineers don't get blindsided by this, if we say, yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, I know how to do that. Yeah, I understand that technology. That puts us as engineers in a much better position to work closely with owners and program directors and programmers and consultants so that we can be at the forefront of this stuff too. So that's the purpose of today's show. It's going to be good. I always learn a lot. So hang on. Our show is brought to you in part by a brand new sponsor. Now, they've been around for a long time, but they're new to this show, and that's Broadcasters General Store. And one of the things that BGS has for you this week is a product from Broadcast Tools. And I know that as engineers, this is the kind of thing that we sometimes we just need. We got to stick it in. It's we got to have a box that does something. So let's see if we can take a look at this box from Broadcast Tools. It's their Universal 4.1 MLR Web. Now, what is that? Well, it's a web-based, transparent, 4-input, 1-output switcher router. Now, it's got mechanical latching relays designed to pass either analog or AES signals. And, sometimes you just need a hardwired thing right before your transmitter or right before something critical. And so this will even if the power goes off, it remembers where it was. And you know what's cool? Of course, you can select your inputs from the front panel. But if this is at your transmitter site, you're not at the front panel, right? Well, it's got a web interface. So you can select what's on the air from the web interface. But what if the web is down? Well, what if you've got dial-up? It's got contact closure inputs to select which input goes on the air. So, and it's completely passive in terms of the audio chain. That means it doesn't need power to continue passing your analog or your AES digital signal. Now, it does need power to switch it, but it doesn't need power to keep on passing it. So whatever you left it in, that's what it's going to be in. It's also really convenient to connect it up because it has both your standard XLR connectors and it has the Studio Hub standard ins and outs. So it's got the RJ45s for Studio Hub wiring. So it's really easy to wire. It's easy to keep it in place, easy to wire, and it's, again, got a couple different methodologies for connecting to it. Contact closures, and that can even come from, some transmitters on their remote control. They offer GPOs, outputs, that you can give contact closures with. So many different remote control systems, whether they're web-based, serial connected, telephone connected, whatever, you can get contact closures out of them. And so you can control the contact closures with this Universal 4.1 MLR web from the folks at Broadcast Tools. The web interface is pretty cool. I've used another product from Broadcast Tools just recently that had a very similar web interface. It's easy, works well, and just browse right into it. It does have, of course, password protection, so you can deal with that if you need to. If you need to, you can use this in the opposite direction because it's passive. You can have it split or send a signal from one place to 4 different places, not at the same time, but select which 4 it would go to. But normally you'd use this as a 4 in, 1 out router. Some other applications that you might find for this is, let's say you've got a reverse feed coming from your transmitter site to the studio for a couple of different, let's say, MYAT units or other types of audio remote pickup units, whether they be IP based or good old, 160 megahertz or 450 megahertz RF base, but you only have one path back. Well, you can select which receiver at your transmitter site is going to feed your one path back by using this Universal 4.1 MLR web from Broadcast Tools. Really cool. Hey, there's a lot of other products from Broadcast Tools. This is just one of the latest ones, but check them out. The website is broadcasttools.com. And hey, at my stations, I use a number of these. These are, just stalwart industry standard items that solve problems. Don Wingate and his crew there just keep on making interesting devices that help you solve problems. One of the things that you might find, if you look at their main web page at broadcasttools.com, you scroll way on down to where you see some green on the page. That's the satellite receiver connector adapters. How many times have you needed to wire to a satellite receiver and say, oh man, I've got to get the soldering iron out, or I've got to get the crimper out to crimp those little tiny pins on a D-sub connector? Well, they make these really convenient connectors called the Connecto pads or the Connecto adapter to adapt any of the satellite receivers that out there on the market, the standard ones with the standard D-sub connectors. So you can just bring them out to wires. Easy peasy, problem solved. And that's their slogan. Well, not the easy peasy part, but the Broadcast Tools, problem solved. Check them out. And of course, they're available from our new sponsor, Broadcasters General Store. And I'd like you to check out Broadcasters General Store if you haven't. I've been doing business with these folks since the early 1990s. Whether you deal with Jessica there, or Chris, or Dave, or Buck, or Candy, or Carrie, any of them are just so helpful. I know I've left some out too. The thing about Broadcasters General Store is they have an enormous selection because they have relationships with something like 600 manufacturers. They can get you stuff that you wouldn't even think. Like if you need a lighting system for your studio, because you're going to put some TV cameras in there, bam, they can get it for you. You need like special video monitors, bam, they can get it for you. Again, access to over 600 manufacturers. A lot of stuff is on hand right there in their Ocala, Florida shop. And of course, they have great, direct shipping relationships with these manufacturers. So they have great service, and I mean that. You call them up, you get what you're looking for, great savings and great support. Hey, I've called around and gotten bids. BGS so often has been the best bid I've gotten when I have to get multiple bids. Their phone number is 352-622-7700. The website's really easy. If you get the phone number, no problem. Go to the website. It's BGS. That's short for Broadcasters General Store, bgs.cc. I think .com wasn't available years ago, so it's short and easy. bgs.cc, bgs.cc. Check them out. We sure thank Broadcasters General Store for being our newest sponsor here on This Week in Radio Tech. And what's cool about what they're going to do with us for the next year, they're going to be on the air for a year here, is we're going to tell you about a different product each week that BGS represents. So it's going to be, like me, you're going to find out new stuff. Like I didn't know about that Universal 4.1 MLR switcher from Broadcast Tools. Just found out about it today. So you're going to find out about new stuff if you pay attention here. So thanks a lot, bgs.cc, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, we are with Gary Kline and Chris Tobin on the show today. Gary, I guess we just start right out with you. What is new and hot on your radar? What have you seen that you're excited about, that you know is going to happen, that engineers need to find out about and keep on their radars as well?
Bam. That's all I can say. Bam. You want it, you've got it. I love that. And after seeing that entire ad that you just did and all those cool products, I mean, what could I possibly talk about? Those satellite adapters are great, by the way. I've used them myself, and I'm all kidding aside. Those are a lifesaver. Those tiny little things are great. Yeah. So what are the things that I'm seeing and talking to people about? So just to recap what you said a minute ago, I do meet many engineers around the country and around the world, as you know. I do visit stations around our beautiful country here in the United States and also many other countries. And I do talk and meet with manufacturers, both from here and from abroad. And I do meet and talk to many station managers, sales managers, corporate executive types, C-level types from here and again abroad to get a sense of, their challenges, their needs, to understand that's from the radio broadcast side, to understand the thoughts that many manufacturers have, where they're headed, where they think things are headed, what they're working on. Sometimes they ask me what I think they should be working on, as I'm sure they ask other people. Not sure I'm not the only person they talk to, but I make it my business to go and talk to them. I talk with engineers to find out what their needs and challenges are. And of course, I consult in a number of different places with both stations, owners, potential owners, and manufacturers on product design or new and innovative ways to market certain products. So all of that experience, gives me every day things to think about and things to share with people, right? I both suck information in, and then when asked as a consultant or a friend, I spit it out. And again, as you know, you and I've spent lots of time together in person talking about different things. So the things that I'm seeing out there now that I talk to people about when they ask me questions like you just asked me are these. One, I think as engineers, we need to continually remember and remind ourselves that we're no longer just engineers. We're engineers, of course, but we're also media gurus. We are management gurus. We're talking about different forms of media, whether it's streaming or video or content creation or offline editing. Even if you're in radio, we're talking about transmitters. We're talking about IP and audio over IP and the modernization and digitization of our facilities and our transmitter sites and the transport mechanisms between them and potentially transport mechanisms and technologies between our stations if we're a part of a group that has more than one market.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at and thinking we should be thinking this way as engineers about ad technology. We touch it sometimes and we don't even know it. How are listeners or viewers being accounted for? What technology do we have at the radio station, or should we be installing to further that? Right. So streaming is a very good basic example of monitoring listeners and for them to be tracked, typically by the companies that supply our streaming. They've got their own ad networks. They've got their dashboards and collection of advertisers and back-end technology to help people pinpoint, or advertisers rather, pinpoint who's listening, where they are, and through a whole bunch of other scary mechanisms, almost knowing who you are, what your age is, what your income is, where you potentially live, or what zip code you're in, with deeper dive, maybe where you shop, where you visit to shop, and perhaps some history on what you've bought. That's really interesting stuff and what advertisers want more of, both from TV and radio. And radio's working very hard to meet those demands. And that's relevant and important to the managers and the owners of companies who want to continue to fight. We call it the fight for advertising against all the digital players out there, the Facebook, the Googles, and the others of the world. And so I think that's interesting. Now, we don't all have all the answers, and it's not like you snap your fingers and you install a box in your rack, and now you've got the answers to these problems like we might with one of those broadcast tools boxes. But there are things that we are doing and continue to do. Visual radio is another example where we could provide streaming that and other information out on the internet that can be tracked when people are monitoring digitally. The folks at NextRadio, right, they're working on and have methods to further define who's listening and how long they're listening and what kind of person is listening and really drill down on things. And all of these things are really important. When you look at companies like Jelly and other programmatic technologies that can insert ads that are more targeted for the listenership into your audio on your station, and even deeper than that if it's on a stream or a digitally connected device, maybe your phone in the car or whatnot. Those are interesting discussions and really the hot buzz that gets talked about when I meet with owner types. As engineers, we should be cognizant of that, understanding it, and ready to deploy whatever comes our way that we haven't already deployed yet to solve those problems. I don't have all the answers to that, and I don't think we have seen all of the technologies that are out there, but it's coming. Look, Amazon, Alexa, the Google devices, and the Apple HomePod, those are devices that also, when, people may not realize this, I guess we kind of do because it's in the news now quite a bit, but when people listen to you through that device, that information is tracked, and then all of a sudden, there's a whole lot known about that listener through other different relational databases that can track through cookies. Are there other technologies? I mean, there's in your iPhone, you've got an ad ID number built into the phone. When you stream a piece of audio or video through that number and linking it to other databases through a whole variety of third-party companies, names of which you may have never heard of, they can really know an awful lot about you and target you directly. So that is really the big deal. That's when it comes to money. That's when it comes to fighting off digital, holding our ground, and potentially growing revenue in that segment, as many big radio companies are doing, and smaller radio owners are doing it too, although they may not be doing all of that internally, but they may be working with third-party companies and other ad network or advertising representatives that have such ad networks built into their system. Cats, for instance, and other companies. So that's high tech, and that's really relevant to folks. The other things that are a little bit easier to do and solve that we can do today that people are talking about, I'm sure this isn't unfamiliar to anybody watching, but not everybody's installed it yet, is visual radio, cameras in the studio, using that for live broadcast, storing the data and the content for offline viewing, whether it's a podcast or it's an on-demand selection from an app, a mobile app, or your website. So we're seeing bits and pieces of that by a lot of you stations, and stations that have really, dove deep into it are producing wonderful content with graphics. I know of some folks on radio that are doing even scripted shows with scripts and people and actors. I mean, it's unbelievable. You see a lot of this on YouTube and Facebook Live. But now we see a lot of people in radio getting into the swing of things, and what you buy to do that and who's offering those products and what it costs. That's a lot of what I talk to people about when I talk to broadcasters who ask me, well, what else can we do that's new? Or, hey, I've heard of this visual thing. I think I can sell it to a few clients. What do I need to do to get into it? And it's more than just the equipment too. It's like, well, what does your studio look like? What's your lighting like? What kind of console configuration do you have? What kind of storage do you have? Are you going to store the video? Are you going to do that in-house, or are you going to do that in the cloud? Who's going to edit? What's your resource? What are your resources like? Who are the people at your station that even know how to work this, operate it, or even edit video? So there's a whole variety of things that you get into when you look at that. But visual radio is something that people could do, today as cheaply as a couple of webcams, and whether you use TriCaster or some PC, software. I saw something the other day for, I don't know, about $1,000. I think is it Adobe or no? It's the folks that own or Dish owns them. Sling has a piece of software that looks pretty cool. You probably, I think you know about it, Kirk. So visual radio is one. Social media aggregation, pulling in all your Twitter feeds and other comments, Facebook comments online, bringing that into a dashboard in your studio. Our folks out in the UK at Broadcast Bionics, they have a way to put a dashboard in your studio where you can see real time sentiment as you're speaking on the air or your morning show's talking, to see what kind of comments you're getting about you or your friends are commenting on, or rather your friends at the station or your friends' friends on what they're saying, or even understand what's going out in the world. What are the top 5 hot topics when you walk in the morning that's going on that morning, that maybe one of the day before, right? That's all very important. Sorry, Kirk, what was that?
Oh yeah, I was agreeing. Oh yeah, you walk in and get those 5 hot topics. So this is quite a great 30,000 foot view, and I have one question about the 30,000 foot view, and then I'd like to pivot to what what does this imply? What do these technologies imply for engineers to be doing at their station? You know, like when a box of stuff arrives and when a solution is sold from Broadcast Bionics or whomever it may be, what might this look like for the local engineer? What skills, what things is the local engineer going to need to be doing? So my follow up on the 30,000 foot view is you talked earlier about about metrics, you know, and if you're listening with an FM radio, there's just about no metric available for that can feed back to the station and then to advertisers. And so I think we all kind of know that as we move forward, years and years from now, I don't know that we're still going to have over the air FM, analog or digital, that at least that doesn't have a feedback mechanism. You know, right now you actually have a good sense of privacy when you're listening. You can listen to any FM station you want to, or AM, and nobody knows about it, right? But if you listen to almost anything online on your phone, well, the people who monetize that are going to know about it. They absolutely are. And so it seems like radio has been in this position where, well, we're going to move to digital, but a lot of times we still kind of poo-poo digital and whatever advantages it has, because we don't own digital like we own the airwaves. Will there be a time when traditional broadcasters will have pretty well moved into either owning or being a super significant part of digital distribution, such that that's what we focus on almost all the time? I mean, tell me about that transition into that, where it's kind of our friend, our enemy, then our frenemy, and then our friend.
Enemies, frenemies, friends. Oh my God, I'm confused, Kirk. No, look, that's a great question. I'm going to answer it 1 second, but before I answer that, you started off by suggesting that if you're listening to an FM radio, an analog FM radio, you really can't be tracked. Well, that's pretty much true, in that any of our engineers watching understand that if I'm holding a portable radio in my hand, I mean, how the heck are they going to know that? And in my car, well, depending on the car and the radio, you know, how the heck are they going to know that? But I have sat in on some presentations over in Europe and in Canada and here in the U.S. by a couple of different individuals that are in the know, that have done presentations on this and other things. And unfortunately, I don't have any of those slides to show you here, but maybe we'll do that on another episode if I can get permission to show them. But some of the car radios that are in cars that have 4G or a feedback loop already, 3G or 4G built in, for other things, whether it's navigation or who knows. There are some radios that are reporting back to whoever what you're listening to and when you're listening to it. Now, it may be quote unquote anonymous data, not directly linked to you, but there is some information coming back to people. Not every car manufacturer or car radio manufacturer, and not in every locale is this done. But I have seen some data where some of that's been gathered. So there is some of that going on, just probably in the last several years, not 15 years ago or not 20 years ago, maybe not even 7 years ago, right? But I've seen some of that data. So some of that's going on right now, just as an FYI. And as you said, of course, if you're on a digital device, that can be tracked. If you're using an FM tuner, I don't know what a tuner is, but if you're using an FM tuner, you very likely could be on a mobile device, could likely be tracked as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, really, if you read the 8 million line end user license agreements that we all click on when we install stuff or start up our phone for the first time or agree to download an app, you'd be, there's a lot of stuff buried in there, as I'm sure none of us are surprised to learn, that gives certain people permission to track things in a way that, may be anonymous, but not really when it's combined with other data. Some of the, hidden secrets that are not so secret of the internet. Now, your next question about, what should we be thinking about as engineers, and what's this transition, and will we see broadcasters go more into the digital, arena, meaning one day, many, many years from now, as you said, are we no longer really worried or using a terrestrial analog frequency, but we're the purveyor of just a whole bunch of digital video or audio streams? Are we, now a Spotify or a Pandora? And is that what business we're in? I don't know the answer to that. I think it's more likely we're heading towards something like that. based on what people are doing. And remember, it's not entirely up to us. It's also up to what end users want. And we all know somebody that's 15 or 16 or 17 or 20 or 25, take your pick. Some people may disagree with me, but, and maybe people that are 40 and 50 and 60, I don't mean to leave them out, but certainly the younger generations are growing up on their phone and on Alexa as young as 3. I've seen presentations on this where all they know is a digital device, many of which, don't have their FM tuners enabled in them, although that's certainly changing, and you'll find that more often than not. But they're really learning to listen to digital, streams, hopefully our radio station streams, as well as probably others. And so that's what's going on in the world from the end user standpoint. So we definitely have to keep adapting to that in whatever ways that we can do that. And I hate to be cliche here because we always say this when we talk amongst ourselves in broadcasting, but we have to stay relevant. But we really do have to stay relevant in those ways and potentially others. We haven't talked about marketing. We haven't talked about advertising. We haven't talked about the kind of content we air, and that's not exactly what we do, I think, on this show. But I don't want to leave those things out. I mention them only to say technology is only one part of a puzzle that is what is our sort of our solution and how we prepare for the future. But that all aside, on the tech side, as an engineer, if boxes show up, the things we need to be prepared for are the same things we should be prepared for today, in my opinion. We need to know our IT. We need to know our routers. We need to know our security. We need to know our IP. We need to know our ports. We need to know our bandwidth. We need to understand how video streaming and audio streaming works up, as we push out or as people pull from us. We need to understand our CDNs. We need to know what players are out there. When I say players, I mean companies and third parties, not an actual player, although you probably need to know that as well. Meaning, if I said to you as an engineer today, or I asked you, hey, who should you stream with? Who would be your streaming provider if you didn't want to set up your own CDN backend and write your own code? People would mention a couple of different names right off the top of their head, names that we probably all know. If I said, or if I asked you, what are you going to do for video? Who can stream your video, or who would be a content provider, or who can store your video or help you with that? You might be harder pressed to answer those questions. And so as engineers, we should be more prepared and understand who the players are out there. So if our manager or our program director or operations director comes to us to ask those questions, that you at least have an answer, you know where to turn. So we need to be really IT savvy for all of these various technologies. If we install visual radio, besides what I just mentioned, which has to do more with live streaming and offline content, we need to understand camera angles. What camera should I buy? We should be up to date on that. We want big ones, small ones, 4K, 1080, what matters? Where would I place those in my studio? What's my lighting like? Do I have enough electricity in the ceiling for lighting? Do I need to add some? What kind of cable am I going to use? Am I going to use Cat 6 or am I going to use SDI? What is SDI, right? If you don't know what SDI is, Google it, HDSDI, and understand these technologies. Write down what kind of connector do I put on that cable and where do I buy it? Those are the things that we should know as engineers to be prepared and to be ready. And not only that, not even to be ready when we're asked, but I really should say to be proactive, to sit down with our managers. This is what I do as a consultant, to sit down with folks and say, hey, we're not doing any video, but there is video going on in the world. Here are a couple of apps. Here are some other websites from other radio stations that I found that are really doing a great job. I think we should at least look at this and talk about it. At least I wanted to bring it to your attention. And if you're ready to do it, I can get you some pricing and I can give you some suggestions for, great, better, best in cost and in quality and whatnot. And so there's nothing to stop you from being proactive that way. I think as engineers or media engineers, if you will, we look good and we look smart as we are and as we should look when we bring that to their attention. So those are some of the things I think, Kirk, that people need to know and should be prepared with. That's sort of 30,000 foot and then jumping down right into the weeds when we start talking about, knowing how to program your router or knowing who you would call to do that for you if you don't know how to do it. As we always say, if you don't know some of these things, there's nothing wrong with that. I used to tell all of the engineers that work for me at Cumulus, there's nothing wrong with not knowing. The only thing wrong is not asking. And if you don't have friends or people to ask, Google it. Ask somebody at the SB, ask somebody at the IEEE, ask fellow engineers at an SBE meeting, send an email to Kirk. But there's
Yeah,
ways
right,
to get
right.
help. Right.
Oh, and hey,
does that answer your question?
even with very well. Although I've got to follow up. We got a quick break to help pay for our show, and I'm sure Chris Tobin will have some comments too. One thing that is with the technologies you talked about in a very still a 30,000 foot view. No matter what we do as engineers, as broadcasters, any kind of future interaction with cameras or automatic collection of voices and content, any automatic splitting those up, automatic making things into podcasts, automatic voice isolation, all of these things that I see coming down the pike to make our content that we're already doing, to make it more accessible and more fit, as Dan McQuillan says, more fit for the internet or other social media. All of these are based on that content being produced in an audio over IP studio environment, because it's AOIP that gives you all the clues as to what's going on in the studio, so that these automated systems can do their job to the best effect. And we'll talk a bit about that when we come back. Chris Tobin was going to give us a little tour, or at least talk about the transmitter site where he is. It was just fascinating. So we'll continue here in just a minute. You're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 398. And I'm Kirk Harnack. Chris Tobin is along in a secret transmitter site, and Gary Kline is our guest, talking about lots of future tech and what we as engineers need to be ready for. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Lavo. Go to lavo.com/TWiRT. It'll take you right to the web pages that have all their radio gear and radio routing systems in it. So check it out. Let's hear from them. We'll be right back.
There has probably never been a better time in history to buy a new radio mixing console. Today's consoles are more sophisticated than ever, with more features and functions than you can shake a stick at. But have you noticed how complicated they are? There's a sea of knobs and switches and displays and buttons. Some of them look like you might need a pilot's license to do your show. Well, a board doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Just look at the new Ruby mixing surface from Lavo. The first thing you notice is how smooth and streamlined it is. Ruby has lots of cool tech, but what it doesn't have is that confusing ocean of buttons that clutter things up. Now, we all know that there are some console features the jock only uses once in a while. So why dedicate controls to them? Ruby fixes this problem by moving those once-in-a-blue-moon controls to a touch-sensitive, customizable GUI that happily shares screen space with your other studio software, helping you fight control room clutter. Thanks to this design innovation, talent that use Ruby produce smoother shows with less errors. Controls that are used the most fall naturally to hand, while functions that rarely need adjustment are easily controlled with just a couple of clicks in the context-sensitive GUI. And Ruby has cool features you won't find on other boards, like Auto Mix, an intelligent gain writing function that guarantees the perfect mix for multi-mic morning shows and call-in segments. Dual mode snapshots that instantly switch the motorized faders between on-air and production modes, and enough DSP and I/O options to make even your pro sound pals green with envy. And because quality is as important to Lavo as it is to you, every console is proudly built to fanatically precise standards at Lavo's own factory in Germany. If you're ready to declutter your control room, do yourself a favor. Check out the new Ruby and the other cool Lavo radio tech at www.lawo.com/TWiRT.
And we sure thank Lavo for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech and their technologies that include audio over IP as well. And that's part of what we're talking about here. You're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 398. Kirk Harnack, Chris Tobin, and Gary Kline are all along here right now. Let's check in with Chris Tobin. Haven't heard from him in a few minutes as Gary was answering our 30,000-foot questions. Chris, you're in a transmitter site, is that right?
Yes, I am. I'm here to transmit a site. Lots of things going on, and there is safety practiced here. So that's the hard hats are available for those who are working around here. Did some rooftop work the other day, so hard hat was required.
Oh.
So this site, oh yeah. So this site here, let's see if we can do this carefully. So what you're looking at there is a MYAT brand VHF combiner for TV stations. That's the large rectangular boxes or the combiner cavities. The black box down below is the mask filter. For those of you in digital television know what that's about. Those of you who are not, basically it's a bandpass filter. So if you're familiar with land mobile radio, amateur radio, and even FM RF, it's a bandpass filter for digital TV. And then in the background, or farther out there, is another mask filter combiner for the other VHF station. They're combined onto one antenna here at the building. And then let me see if I can do this without too much trouble. That's the air handling unit straight in the back. And then just to the side of that, if the light permits, is a Liebert UPS system for the broadcast facility. So there's a generator downstairs on the floor, about 3 floors below where I'm standing, and there's a UPS supply. So essentially, you could lose utility power here in New York City, and the UPS will carry the load. Generator comes online, and you never even see the lights flicker. And they have done tests, and it's pretty wild. So it's pretty cool. It's a very broadcast-friendly facility. That's one of the selling points. So that's why the people here, then one of the TV stations recently moved in because of that. So they left one building to come here. And it's a lot of fun. And there are FMs here too. They have backup sites for the FM stations here in this building. My facility is here in this building. So it's good.
Wow. All right, cool. Thanks for that. And that combiner and bandpass filter technology, you know, it's on the one hand, it's a bunch of bent metal. On the other hand, it's really precisely bent with all the laws of physics and RF being well understood to make these things work and behave extremely well for literally decades. They can just work and work and work doing their job. And a very important job it is, you know, keeping, combining things together to use a common antenna and also rejecting other interference coming in so new intermodulation products are not made, and for keeping these transmitters that are combined from even seeing each other, which is pretty important. Transmitters don't like to be part of a group. They like to think everything is all their own. They're that way.
This is true. Well, you recall some of the earlier episodes, I was in the FM combiner room at a facility, and we showed you the Shively balanced hybrid combiners and for the FMs, and the same thing. So this is the TV version, the FMs we did earlier episodes. And yes, the RF, and Gary knows this, it's a black magic, black art. It does require some textbook, and then the other 90% is your experience in the field. So it's pretty wild. It's a lot of fun, though. It is a lot of fun.
You know, before the show is over, I intend to ask Gary, heads up Gary, about any RF interesting things that you've seen in your travels. As I know you, as much as I do, love to go to transmitter sites, as much as Chris does, and see, what people are doing, combining, or, how they're putting DAB on the air in other countries, and, methods of combining HD, whether it's space combining or, whatever they're doing now, mostly inside the transmitter. So we'll get to that. Gary Kline is our guest. He is the founder and CEO and president and chief bottle watcher at Kline Consulting. He travels the world talking to radio stations, sometimes doing things that you and I do, and sometimes doing things that we wish we could do. So, Gary, I'm glad you're here on the show. So I put forth the premise that a lot of the new technologies that we're going to see getting incorporated into broadcast facilities, that they are going to work best or going to require that a facility is using audio over IP, because the individual channels are easily available on the network. That signaling from GPIO, for example, is available on the network. And it's just so easy. And I know that Dan McQuillan of Broadcast Bionics says this. He says, all you have to do is give us the IP address of your audio console. Our software goes in there, and we know everything we need to know to produce reasonably good television from your broadcast. So, Gary, talk about that for a minute, if you would.
Yeah, sure, Kirk. And in fact, I went and visited Dan and Duncan at Broadcast Bionics, about 6 weeks ago over in the United Kingdom. About 45-minute train ride outside of London if you ever go to London. He's got a beautiful facility there. Spent a lot of time with him there. Spent a lot of time with him in New York and a couple of other places, really picking his brain and understanding how he got to where he is, why they're doing the things they're doing, and what their vision is. And of all the people that I've met, and I think Dan and Duncan know this, of all the people I met and manufacturers I've spoken to that talk about the future, that make products for the future, they were some of the most impressive that I've seen in my career. And I don't often say that. So I think that they're onto some great stuff. In fact, I went over to the BBC about 6 weeks ago, and visited their head of technology. Paul, he's a great great guy, and his team, smart people over there. And they have a secret. I don't know if it's secret. It's not that secret, but you're not allowed in it unless you have permission. But they have a lab. They have a laboratory, several different studios and different departments people in departments that work together on new technologies, what the future is going to look like, how they're going to distribute audio and video and apps. And I probably can't say more than that because I'm probably not allowed to, but just spending some time with them and what they're looking at and what they're working on is amazing. Some of it much in alignment with the work that Broadcast Bionics is doing and maybe the work of others. So that was fascinating. And one of the things you touched upon a moment ago that I didn't bring up, but I should have, and I commend you, Kirk, for reminding me of this, is parsing stuff out, automatic podcasts, and this, speech to text. This is a big deal. Broadcast Bionics does it. There are some other companies who do it. Veritone does it. But the ability to convert your speech automatically through our, in the cloud, through artificial intelligence and other means to text is amazing. It basically takes all of your audio and turns it into now Google search. It's Google search, right? So you can type in terms, and instead of just getting web pages or links back, you can get links to audio. If you're on your web page, you can have a station web page where if I type in Kirk Harnack, anytime Kirk Harnack was mentioned in their programming on a show, off a feed, anything that passed through their airwaves or through their airwaves out into the ether or stream, I guess, for that matter, is logged that way. So if Kirk Harnack was mentioned in a conversation or in an interview, you can actually get a clip that's maybe, a minute, or you set the time, you set it any way you want, but a minute or two before and a minute or two after to have context. You can even probably listen even more than that, but you can get quick clips to zoom in on things. It's important with video too. I've said this for a while. People don't think about it until, well, I guess they think about it, but not at first. And that is speech to text for metadata. And I know Dan and his crew, do this as well, but if you are recording a lot of video in your radio station and saving it, a year or two or three down the line when, I don't know, I'm going to say Kenny Chesney, but I guess he doesn't walk into every radio station, but pick your mayor, pick the mayor or something. But you want to find out every time the mayor was in and every video clip you had, because maybe you want to replay it or you want to get a quote or some audio or video content that he was involved with to reuse during his next visit. How are you going to find it? So you need metadata. Now you can type that in manually, but boy, most of us don't have the staff to do that. So speech to text is very helpful. Speech to text is great for commercials and advertisers. And this goes back to new technologies that can certainly help, your top line revenue. The ability for clients now to either go into a portal and type in their name, like the local dry cleaners, and get an audio clip of every time the spot ad for verification, and which is very important these days, really being able to prove to people that you actually aired what you said you aired when you said you aired it, more than the DJ signing off on a log like like maybe they do now, but certainly the olden days, or just an automatic as played list from an automation system. I mean, how do you know you weren't off the air when it played? That's what advertisers will ask. So the fact that a system says it played it and went through the console doesn't actually mean it hit air, although it typically does. You don't have full proof, but with speech to text off air, you have that. So it's great for clients. It's a great way to do proof of concept for somebody, and it's a great way for video to get your video clips found or stored or sorted. A great way for people to search the internet and come to your station and your webpage. If your station did a Justin Bieber interview backstage in whatever market you're in, and there was something spoken about or his name was mentioned, and somebody types in his name, wouldn't it be great maybe for somebody somehow to land on your webpage and get that content? It's another way to draw people in, and the more people that look at your sites or listen to your audio, the more count you have in theory, and maybe perhaps the more pennies per listener, or internet viewer you get. So all of that matters. And I wanted to mention that because you touched upon it briefly, Kirk, and I thought that was important. I also want to say one other thing, and I hope this isn't taken the wrong way. everything we do is important, right? As engineers and technologists, when we put new consoles in, it's important. We're going to talk about audio over IP in 1 second. When we put in new processing, that's very important. When we put in new phone hybrids, that's important. When we go analog to digital and we do something in our infrastructure in our plant, that's important. That leads to that. When we change out the mic, it's important. When we put a new transmitter, it's important because it's part of the distribution chain. But a lot of those things are more today maintenance, upgrades, improvements, but mostly that, unless you were really bad off, your listeners don't hear as much. So while they're all important and we should still keep buying all those things, from an ownership management, top line revenue or bottom line perspective, with a few exceptions, meaning a more efficient transmitter probably saves you a few bucks on electricity, maybe more than a few bucks, and so that's important. I don't want to ignore any of those important things, but from an overall moving the needle, viewpoint, these new technologies we're talking about, and we haven't mentioned all of them tonight, just a few because we only have a short time together, but those things are what relevant and or what is relevant and resonate most with station owners, whether they're small owners or bigger group owners. These other things that we do are all important to everybody, but they're not as relevant. They're not top of mind with most people that I know, unless, of course, there's a small station or medium station owner that's eager to get some console replaced. Like, that's all great. But as far as moving the needle and moving our industry down the road and preserving our place in history, I think the things that we talked about tonight and other things we haven't talked about, maybe for a future episode, or maybe you'll have another guest on who will talk about some of those things. Those things are what's really important. As far as audio over IP in the studio and consoles, absolutely, Kirk. I mean, the ability to have all of the streams reachable, addressable, to understand where levels are in a fader very precisely, to be able to route audio in many different ways, to be able to do GPIO and trigger things. I mean, consider this scenario. You have 4 studios in your small station, and each has cameras, and each has a console, and different people go into studios on different days for whatever reason they do that. And one day, Studio A is going to be station WXYZ, and you want the video and graphics and audio to all route and be present and look like that radio station, including your automation system, all the screens that you view, all your call screening information, your phone hybrids, everything's got to be a certain way. But the next day, maybe that's the bigger studio. And the next day, you only need the smaller studio because somebody else needs the bigger studio because they're not all big because you're space constrained. That would be one reason you would do this. And then the next day, you're in another studio, and you need to hit a button, simple button that then reroutes all the audio, all the IFBs, mix minuses, camera feeds, graphics feeds, blah, blah, blah. You can do that with audio over IP and with video and video routers soon not on the horizon. It's happening now, but it's not fully there yet. Video's going down our path of video over IP, SMPTE 2110 and other technologies. But these merging of technologies and video over IP and audio over IP, for now, if you're not doing video over IP and you're doing, SDI or HDMI, you can buy routers that are addressable. There's still a way to do this. But the ability to hit buttons and make things happen very quickly in a very fast-paced, dynamic environment, whether you're a small station or a large station with, let's say, 20 studios in it, is very, very important. We really couldn't do this with the technology from 20, 25 years ago. You could probably with a bunch of relays and boxes and God knows a lot of the homebrew stuff that we built over the years. But today, in today's modern world, to move fast, move quick, and make it easy for the typical operator or board op or video producer to do these things, you got to go that route. And again, to further strengthen your point, Kirk, with Broadcast Bionics and other manufacturers, the ability to plug into an IP network and for that system to know a lot of what it needs to know so that you don't have to do a lot of programming, that's just invaluable. If you're watching this and this doesn't make a lot of sense to you, or you've not seen, or maybe it kind of makes sense, but you haven't seen it up front and you want to witness it, go to an NAB, visit a manufacturer, go to a local SBE or SMPTE meeting where somebody is speaking on these topics. I'm a member of AFC and SBE and IEEE and SMPTE, but also I'm now a member of SVG, the Sports Video Group, an excellent group of people around the world that are very professional, very high tech. I was just at the SVG College Summit in Atlanta, in my backyard where I base myself, where I do my dry cleaning and where I fly in and out of when I'm flying, which is, I guess, every other day. but also I've been to the SVG meetings in New York and plan to go to others. If you want to understand more about video and how video works and what small gear looks like and big gear looks like and cheap gear and expensive gear, and you want to mingle with manufacturers and other engineers and folks from all the networks like ESPN and Fox and Comcast, you name it, they're all there. And learn more, whether you're asking questions or just through osmosis by standing next to somebody and listening to their chats with other people, I recommend that you consider doing that. I've actually recommended to the Sports Video Group folks that they think about inviting some of the radio folks out there, and which I don't think they're opposed to. You certainly can become a member as a radio person, but inviting more of them, because we're doing more video, we're doing more sports on the radio, and we're doing in certain markets where it's allowed. I know some owners of stations that want to start bringing video to sporting events. Maybe it's high school sports, local high school team, and nobody puts the games on the air anywhere because it's just a small high school in small town, North Dakota or someplace. Well, if you're a radio station, imagine if you do that with a small kit that isn't too expensive, that goes along now with your announcer who is talking to his POTS line or his Marty or his audio over IP codec device, right? So, these things are all relevant and they're all important, and having audio over IP and at some point video over IP on your back end, that's where we're headed for sure.
Absolutely, man. You are singing the right tune. Yeah, no. You're singing the right tune, and I guess what I hear you saying and what I believe myself is that the days where all an engineer has to concern himself with is a studio and a transmitter and an occasional remote. That's changing. Because we have got to be in social media, especially on smart speakers, and we do great content. So many radio stations do amazing content, and a lot of it has only been available in one place, and that's the over-the-air transmitter. And that's been great for decades, but the world is changing, and we have to get that content easily into the hands of people who like other ways of getting it. And to bring back Dan McQuillan, he has a statement that he says that I think is so true. If we can boil down our future efforts to these things, is that video makes radio content shareable. Because nobody ever shared, or I mean, how many times have you clicked on like a SoundCloud link on Facebook? Probably not. It's rather uncommon. People like to look at what they're hearing, even if they don't end up watching it, that they still can listen to it. I mean, I partake of YouTube stuff all the time that I don't actually watch the video. I just listen to what's going on while I'm doing something else. But the video was there along with it. So. Video makes our audio content shareable, and metadata, that is transcription, makes it searchable. Because right now, if you want to search for what was said on a radio station this morning, you're not going to find it because Google doesn't search and catalog what was said. But if you upload your podcast and you've got a full metadata script along with it, that with all the text, if you publish that, that's picked up by Google. That is searchable. And so if you search for Gary Kline and TWiRT, and actually most of our episodes are actually transcribed, which just proves my point. But if we weren't transcribed, you'd never know it. You couldn't find it on Google or any other search engine. So making what we do as content creators searchable and shareable, and us as engineers, our part in helping that to happen, I think is critical for the future of what we do, the things that we do so well, which is content creation. I got to ask Chris Tobin if he agrees or disagrees. Chris?
I totally agree. I've been saying this for years. It's all about the content and the workflow, the creative workflow is what I call it. And, if the tools are on the table, just put them, apply them. And to Gary's point, transmitter sites, remote studios, that part of the infrastructure is pretty much set in stone. It's pretty straightforward. And if you want to move the needle and get an ROI for your business and keep your job, learn the new stuff, see how to apply it. I mean, I can tell you right now, if you had asked me, say, 10 years ago, do you expect to ever be doing video in the radio station or doing video at all? I'd say, well, I'm not sure if that'll ever happen. I can tell you in the last 2 years, I have shot 32 videos, music interviews. And I've come to learn a few things about, I'm an amateur photographer to begin with, so I knew a lot of that stuff, but video is a very different approach. As Gary pointed out, you need to learn and know and understand the inner surf. And like me as a broadcast engineer, I'm actually traveling today because I was doing some video stuff this morning. I'm carrying a light meter. This is a light meter.
Gosh.
Okay, and then a transmitter site with a light meter. So these are the things you have to learn and understand. And once you apply it, you'd be surprised the stuff you could be doing and the money you could be making if you have a visionary or very, very forward-thinking operation. But yeah, it's, you know what? I always say this: your imagination is the limiting factor. If you don't have an imagination or can't see beyond just what's in front of you, then yeah, you should expect to turn off the transmitter or stop working. And don't treat the radio station or the radio signal as something alien. That is the engine that drives all the other elements, as Dan and the others have talked about over the years.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that engine, that piece, which is the most unique element broadcasters have, you know what? I've got nieces and nephews who don't even understand or know anything about analog radio or TV. They just know what's available today. But when they find out about it, go, wow, this is part of what I enjoy. They're inquisitive. They want to know more. And then you can even grow on that. So there's a lot of stuff going on you could be doing. And I think it's important for us not to put stuff in a category or compartmentalize everything. Just say, hey, I'm a radio station. I reach an audience of X. We're doing great. How do we expand on that? How do we engage that audience? Social media is definitely the way to do it. And then you be smart about it. Don't get crazy and caught up with brand names and, well, I got to spend $40,000 on video in order to make it work. No. You'd be surprised what you can make work if you just think about it. Some of my early videos I worked with were very small consumer cameras that shot very nice video and got creative with the lighting. So now I have more professional cameras. We've been able to get some money together and make things happen. Now you understand the difference between a multiple focal length lens or a single focal length and depth of field and shallow depth of field. And oh yeah, what's that cinema lens type? And the different, there's all things you're going to start to learn that I've been doing.
Hey, you know what?
It works.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
We've been able to sponsor the videos. I actually got local businesses that are involved, and they're like, and Kirk, you pointed out, we may not share the radio audio like SoundCloud or whatever, but when there's a video piece attached to that audio segment, we'll share it. We have discovered, not that it was a mystery, we knew it was just a question of getting there. We have a lot of what we're doing on the radio with a video component has grown our radio audience. It's actually gone, it's like some people look at it, it's like it's backwards. No, it's not. People love what we do on the radio. Now they find out they can see more about what we're doing, which is perishable material. When we're doing our videos, it's with artists, interviews, and there's stuff they talk about and play. You can't get on a CD because they're not producing it. They're doing it one time. And then that's right. Once the video on YouTube, Facebook, or wherever, it's there for life.
So I have a proposed show title here. Gary found the light, Kirk saw the light, and Chris measured the light. There we go. That's too long of a show title. All right. Hey, we're gonna.
Gary's spot on. He's definitely right about what he's been saying.
We're going to be right back with a final thought from Gary and from Chris. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, episode 398, is brought to you by my friends at the Telos Alliance, and specifically Omnia and the Omnia Volt. Hey, this past week, I got to spend some time with some really good European broadcasters and some of our European dealer network, and they had so many great things to say about the Omnia Volt. Oh, we should click on that and accept that cookies thing there on the webpage. The Omnia Volt, you know what they compared it to? And, I've been with the Telos Alliance for a long time, since back when it was just Telos and Omnia, before there was an Axia. And one of my first jobs was to take Omnia processors around to different broadcasters and let them try them out. And you know what? After I'd been with the Omnia for a while, Frank came out with the Omnia 6. And you know what? If you bought a couple of, if you bought a plug-in to make it the Omnia 6, it was $10,000. It was $10,000 or so for an Omnia 6. Well, the Omnia Volt, I hear from actual users and from our dealers, and get agreement from Cornelius Gould. The Omnia Volt, I should say, today is really the same, if not a little bit better than the Omnia 6 of 10, 11, 12 years ago. Yeah, the Omnia Volt actually has technology that we at Omnia, in developing the Omnia 11, and that has gone into the Omnia Volt. Plus, there is some clipping technology now that's in the Omnia Volt that actually got in there before it now has gotten into the Omnia 11. So the the clipper in the Omnia Volt was actually the precursor to what's now available, the Pepino clipper in the Omnia 11. Point is this. Look, if you can afford an Omnia 11 or an Omnia 9, yeah, go for it. You get incredible performance. But if an Omnia Volt at a list price of about $3,500 US, if that's your price point, if that's what you can afford to put on your station, go for it. The Omnia Volt is amazing. It gives you the performance, actually a little bit better than the venerable, the famous, the legendary Omnia 6 that is on literally thousands of radio stations around the world. And now some of them are getting pretty long in the tooth, and they're getting replaced with Omnia 9s and 11s. But the Omnia Volt, if that's in your price point, and hey, for my radio stations that I have in Mississippi and American Samoa and here in Hawaii, the Omnia Volt is right in our price range. Although, come to think of it, here in Hawaii, we got an Omnia 7. But the Omnia Volt is right in your price range, and you're going to get performance out of it that is absolutely spectacular. The Omnia Volt features a new thing that we worked very hard to incorporate in the Volt, and that is quick tweak where you can easily tweak up or down the settings. You don't have to go deal with 25 settings and check their interaction and see how that works. But you can go right in there and adjust it quickly and easily to get the exact amount of what you want. A little more highs. You don't have to adjust 5 things at once to get more highs. You can just go right in there and adjust this one parameter, and it moves several things for you in ways that we know are going to sound good. You want a little more bass. You want the bass to be punchier. You want a little more crispness or a little bit harder clipper action. If you just turn up one thing yourself, you might go the wrong direction. But this feature lets you quickly and easily get that fine tuning just the way you want it. And again, it's easy to do. Get you that very quickly and easily. The Omnia Volt is built for rough service. It is well protected against the electrical elements. It's got our usual features of RDS inputs. It's got a pilot output to go feed your RDS generator. It's got a loop through for RDS. It's got 2 composite outputs. It'll take live wire input. It's got live wire output as well. It's got analog input. It's got AES input, and you can even tell it to automatically switch between these if one of them dies. So that's another feature there. One of the coolest things that I love is the Omnia Volt doesn't require a separate program to remote control it. You can just use literally your smartphone, any browser that's HTML5 compatible, and that's all of them now. You can literally control and set this thing up and monitor it from your smartphone, from a tablet, from any PC or laptop. Makes it very, very convenient. Of course, it's password protected, so you can do whatever you need to do from an IT point of view to be safe, whether that's through a VPN or password protected ports, whatever it might be. You can actually keep it very safe. So check it out if you would. Go to telosalliance.com and look for the Omnia Volt. While you're there, look at the other Omnia products as well. But the Omnia Volt for $3,500 is absolutely amazing. And I just got an earful of that from our dealers and users in Europe last week. Very excited to come back and tell you about the Omnia Volt. Call your favorite dealer. Check it out for yourself. All right, this week in Radio Tech, we're about to wrap up the show. Gary Kline has been our guest, and Chris Tobin is here as well. Chris, you're usually quick with a tip for us there at that transmitter room. What's going on with you, and what's a good tip for us?
A good tip would be, since I'm at a transmitter facility, check on your transmitters by looking at the filters. Make sure everything sounds right. Back up and download all your profiles on your transmitters that have exciters that are digital. Same goes for your IT materials. Make sure you have config files backed up. Put all those things on a disk, or a drive, USB drive, a memory stick. Make 2 copies. Leave one on site, leave one off site. And then just do the usual visual inspection. Those of you at combined sites, I always do. I'm at a combined site. I always take a walk through the combiner room, check and see if any changes were made, anybody new, RFR concerns, and then take a look-see outside at the tower. Take a look up at pair of binoculars or whatever. Make sure your antenna, if you're a single antenna or if you're part of a master group, nothing's hanging off that shouldn't be. I say that only because a friend of mine once told me about a site he was at in Chicago, and it was three FMs on a tower outside of Chicago. And one day he went out, he's looking up, he's like, "We don't have a flag on our antenna. That's interesting." Something went loose from another building and caught one of the bays of the rototiller. So, these are things and nothing to the signal. So there was no indication of VISWAR issues. Thankfully, it was just the cloth. There was no wire, rope, or anything part of the flag. Yeah. These are the things that you don't notice unless you go out and check. So I would say at least once a month, if not twice, check on your site visually. And yes, I know you can do everything through SNMP and all kinds of remote access and blah, blah, blah. All my 5,000 data points I can do on my phone sitting at my living room. That's all well and good, but you can't tell if the blower motor's in trouble in another room that may impact your master antenna, your combiner, or maybe you're next to a room that's not even broadcast. It's communications of some other sort. They have a problem. It can impact you. I can tell you, I've been on my site a couple of times where I've walked in and gone, what is that sound? And one of the 208, 277 transformers was having a problem. It wouldn't have impacted me directly, but it definitely would have caused me a concern if something went wrong. So,
and there's no SNMP will tell you about that. And I was just going to say, no SNMP will alert you to the family of snakes that have set up shop in the corner of the room.
I've worked at AM sites. Yes, I used to come into that a lot of wood spiders and various snakes. And well, yeah, when you have multiple antenna, multiple tower arrays in a swamp, you'd be surprised, or you might not be, of the things that appear at night. Trust me, I've seen some good stuff.
Good nighttime video of that. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that, and appreciate the effort of coming to us from the Secret Transmitter site in New York City. And Gary Kline, you got a tidbit or a tip to leave with our viewers today?
Sure. One last thing to think about in terms of future and where we're headed. A lot of the things we talked about today, visual radio, tying in automation, consoles, phone systems and phone hybrids, and the way that we manipulate and manage these things as we operate in our facility dynamically. It's important to understand that a lot of people right now are working on ways to virtualize these things. I think we're going to see more of these things going to software and headed to server farms than pieces of hardware in our rack. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe over time, and maybe not in the biggest markets that still want things physically, near them. But I think we're going to see things moving towards a software-based or, as a service type delivery for many things. In the United States, with the elimination of the main studio rule, we may see groups of stations being serviced from an engineering point of view, from a back-end point of view, by servers, maybe centrally located in the middle of a state, or regionally in the Northeast or the Southeast, or maybe nationally. And so how these things progress, and what we're trying to do is we overlay and dovetail new technologies at the radio station. I think we need to think about these things. And I know some engineers that now are doing it or working on it. And I know some manufacturers that are thinking along these lines and working on products or ways to deliver products or really as a service to their customers. So just a last minute tidbit, something to think about: the virtualization, not visual radio, but virtual radio, and the virtualization of our technologies behind or under the hood, and what kind of impact that may have on our industry and have on us as engineers, and what does that mean we need to know how to do. That maybe is another TWiRT episode, Kirk, because that's a whole thing into of itself, but that's a last minute tidbit for people to think about.
Well, we sure have been talking about that from time to time, and I know that even over the next 12 months, one of my favorite manufacturer, is going to be making some interesting announcements. So, And hey, at my stations, our IT guy has literally just virtualized all of our automations and all of the ingest systems and the streaming stuff, that it's all running on one Dell server, which has now been duplicated to another one. So yeah, we're audio over IP, Axia Livewire IP drivers, all virtualized, all running in and out of this thing. And yeah, this is happening. And there's no reason why at some point all that couldn't be put into a cloud, either a private or a public cloud environment. So that's coming, and hey, we'll have you back to talk about that. Okay, Gary?
Righto, no problem. It's been fun, guys. And Chris, if you're making if you've made 32 videos and you're going to make more videos, I think you should wear that yellow hat in every video so we know it's you. That's going to be your trademark. The yellow hat, the hard hat.
Yeah. Why not?
Chris, the video director, ready for anything with the yellow hard hat. Oh, gee. Hey, guys, we got to go. Yeah, there you go. We've taken up all of our possible time. And Gary, if people want to reach out to you for your consulting services, you have a website, I believe. It's at klineconsulting.com.
Yeah, that's correct. And my contact info is on there. So feel free to send a note. I'll be in 2 weeks. I'll be in Singapore for a few days, then Malaysia, and then New Zealand. That's my next upcoming international travel. If anybody in those countries is watching or wants to say hi or get together, be happy to do it.
All right. Good deal. Good deal. Thanks a lot. Thanks to Chris Tobin in New York, Gary Kline, wherever he is in Upper Wisconsin. And I'm Kirk Harnack coming to you from a little town of Poipu on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. Thanks a lot to Suncast, our producer for today's show, as always. Great job. And thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. Be sure you check out our sponsors, Broadcasters General Store at bgs.cc. Also, Lavo at lavo.com/TWiRT. And the Telos Alliance. Today we talked about the Omnia Volt from the Omnia division of the Telos Alliance. I'm Kirk Harnack. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.